Hi folks, welcome to your Gersnet Rangers in Estadio da Luz in the first leg of the last 16 of the 2023-2024 UEFA Europa League. In fact, just welcome to your Gersnet Rangers are away to Benfica in the Stadium of Light. Preview pod coming to you in association with Forest Precision Engineering and our good friends at Football Prizes. My name's Alec Anderson. Hello. We are the Billy Bookcase from IKEA Boys. With all due respect to Crystal Palace, with all due respect to the Nigerian national team, with all due respect to Lazio. In fact, did you see Lazio? Lazio the other night, Tuesday night, it was, they were playing Bayern in München in the second leg of the Champions League. You see their strip, you see their badge, the bird, let's just say that they've got in that badge, it's kind of been cartoonified. I know it was their away strip. The goalkeeper had the traditional bird. He's probably wearing the home kit, but they really need to show all due respect to their kit, anyway, with all due respect to Jack Higgins' mid-70s novel about the Second World War, with all due respect to the movie starring Michael Caine that was made from that novel, with all due respect to the 1969 moon landings, with all due respect to the song about those moon landings that was released by British new metal band Saxon. The eagle has landed. The eagle has landed. Yeah, I know it's Eagles. I know their nickname is the Eagles, but you know, see the crest behind me. It's just one eagle that's above their crest, or forms their crest. It's part of their crest, and their motto is E pluribus unum, which means from the one comes pluribums or whatever. But you know, I should probably be saying this next Thursday when they're coming to Ibrox. You know, I'm not going to Lisbon obviously for tonight's game. I should probably be giving it the eagle has landed. It'll probably land properly for me when they turn up in Govan. They turn up in my home stadium. We see Benfica there, but before the game tonight, they're going to be doing that thing where they have the eagle circles, the kind of circumference of the roof of the Stadium of Light, Estadio da Luz, and it comes down, turning in the widening gyre. If you like your Yeats, a terrible beauty is born. It comes down and it lands on the guy's arm in the centre circle. The eagle has landed. Rangers are playing Benfica. I thought it was quite symbolic enough when we went top of the league by beating St Johnstone in Perth a couple of weeks back that the next day Michael Beale gets sacked by Sunderland. I thought that was quite kind of proving, you know, that our manager that we have just now, Philip Clement, was the right man for the job, and also that we're quite right to sack Michael Beale, because that was him getting sacked again the following day. A really symbolic timing, but it was also, he was getting sacked because Sunderland had lost at Birmingham City, who were managed by Tony Mowbray, who we hunted when he was Celtic manager the last time we won a league at a canter in front of crowds back in 2009-2010. And Tony Mowbray went off it, but he was getting revenge because he'd been Sunderland manager. He gets sacked by Sunderland, so it's kind of revenge for him. But then Tony Mowbray announced that he was ill, and he wasn't leaving Birmingham. He was just kind of, you know, handing over to his assistant or whatever, and then he was going to come back once he'd stopped being ill. And the same day, the Eagles, Crystal Palace, they were trying to sack Roy Hodgson, but he got ill before they could sack him. And it was really kind of weird. And then at the end of that week, we drew Benfica in the last 16 of the Europa League. Benfica from the Stadium of Light, Estadio da Luz. I know it's different reasons for naming it and all that. Benfica's a district of Lisbon and the Luz, I think it's a church or something, like Our Lady of the Light or something like that. It gives its name to the little area within Benfica in which the stadium's situated. Different thing for the Stadium of Light Sunderland, but it's still, I thought that was really quite kind of coincidental and symbolic, and things that got all confused in my head. And then Rangers supporters, I made a mistake of going to Twitter or X, whatever you want to call it, because I had to talk about the draw on the Friday. I was just like, yeah, I need to talk about who I want us to get. And when we got Benfica, I was absolutely delighted. And I saw Rangers fans, fellow Blue Noses, saying that they weren't that happy with the draw. And I didn't mind people being not happy about it because they thought it was a difficult tie, and it will be a very difficult tie. We're expected to go out of this one, let's be honest. But it was folks saying that they didn't think it was that exciting, and people saying that they didn't think Benfica were that big a name. They didn't think Benfica were that big a club. It wasn't a very exciting. I'm like, what are you? I can't believe. It's just great enough that Rangers are heading to the city tonight. We play in the city that is the hometown of Rita, the barmaid that Colin Farrell playing Sonny Crockett chats up right at the beginning of Michael Mann's movie of Miami Vice. Good enough that we're going to the city after which the town everybody moves to in the 2000 film by Frank Cotterill Boyce called The Claim, a film set in 1867, and there's a guy in it called Dalgleish, and they moved to this place called New Lisboa, Lisbon. They're going to this place, Lisbon. Rangers are going to Lisbon tonight. It's absolutely immense. We have never lost 4 previous times we've played competitively in Europe in Lisbon. Now, we've lost on the night once, but that time we did lose on the night. We'd been through, before we actually had to play penalties on the night, we were actually had qualified. It was the season we ended up winning. The only time we've ever won a European trophy. It was 71-72. It was Sporting. Okay, we're playing Sporting. And, the famous game against them in the second round, the 71-72 Cup Winners' Cup, where we thought we had to go to penalties, but it turned out the referee didn't know the extra time away goals also counted double, despite the fact he'd been refereeing the final of the Fairs Cup the previous season, which was won on away goals. And as punishment, Lawrence van Ravens, a Dutch referee who put that game between us and Sporting to extra time, to penalties that night, his punishment was he got the UEFA Cup final that season. He got the second leg of that season's UEFA Cup final, Tottenham against Wolves, White Hart Lane. So that's UEFA hasn't really changed, but it's people saying that Benfica aren't a very exciting draw. I think we need to appreciate what we're up against tonight. I don't mean that in like a patronising sense. I mean that as a kind of, if you don't get who we're playing tonight, then you're maybe missing out on something. I'm dead against bumming up the team that we're playing too much now, although I'm now going to do that for the next hour and a half, probably. But I feel that the Champions League, that was last season. Can you believe that? It was just the last season that we played the Champions League group stages of 2 managerial sackings since then. I wish it was more than last season, but I was just so desperate for us to get into the Champions League group stages. That was last season, as far as I was concerned. That was last season's thing that we just needed to do, and that was us totally back from 2012. This season, I decided we needed to win the League Cup as well before we're properly back from 2012. It'll be something different next season as well. But last season, we just had to get in the Champions League. Didn't matter. Excuse me, I'm getting too excited. Didn't matter. If we didn't make it through, I would be satisfied with the quarterfinals of the Champions League last season, as far as I was concerned. But no, I wouldn't care if we didn't. Okay, if we maybe finished in second place in the Champions League group stages, that would be fine. I'm not looking for anything to. Okay, if we took the third place, okay, if we finished bottom of the group, as long as we didn't make a fool of ourselves, we made a fool of ourselves. We ended up having one of the worst campaigns ever recorded in the history of the Champions League group stages. So you've got to be kind of careful for thinking just being there in and of itself is enough. But I don't want Rangers fans. A lot of us just now are thinking we're going to go out. We're going to get put out by Benfica, and a lot of us are quite happy with that, or we think we're going to be quite happy with that. Losing is a cancer. It will spread. You've got to be careful. Quite honestly, it's noticed about next Thursday night we could be out of Europe and the Scottish Cup. Sunday night, if we get horsed tonight against Benfica, and then we get put out the Scottish Cup on Sunday by Hibs, that's us. We've only in one competition out of the 3 we thought we were still in. We've won the 4th one. We won the League Cup, so let's not get too downhearted if that happens. But and it will no be a case of everybody going, oh well, that's fine, I wanted to be out of Europe anyway. The reality of losing is a lot darker always than thinking about it in the abstract. There'll be something should have been done, or we get totally horsed, and that ends up affecting the team's confidence going forwards, or we'll go out in penalties, and if only we'd done this or done that, we could have won that game. That's a failing. It never goes smooth. You can't bank on losing games in certain competitions. The manager himself was saying this in tonight's pre-match presser in Lisbon. Sorry, I'm talking earlier today. I'm talking the early hours of Thursday morning, but he was saying that you can't. It's not like a menu when you get to pick what games you want to try harder and what games you don't. As Brian Clough said, you can't turn it on and off. You've got to try in every single game, in every single competition. When Rangers reached the UEFA Cup final in 2008, pretty much the greatest moment of my life. That was me. My biggest kind of need in my life, supporting Rangers, my longest need, had been sated. I couldn't wait for us to do that. I went down to that final in Manchester, and that was me. I found out later on that off the records, Walter Smith had been saying that he could have done without it. it was affecting Rangers' chances of winning the league that season, obviously, which we ended up losing on the last day of the season. And it kind of broke my heart a bit. I did find out that Walter wasn't really wanting to do Europe. He thought it was just a pain in the neck. But look at what we did that season in Europe. The all-out effort, like beating Fiorentina and Florence on penalties in the semi-final. You couldn't do that stuff without trying your hardest. So even when great Rangers managers know that even when you maybe could do with it, you maybe need to go out one of the competitions, you can't risk not trying in any competition, any game you play in. Or it will spread through quickly to the competitions that you think you are prioritising. So yeah, it's something you've got to do. But I would just like people to appreciate what's happening tonight. What if we do go out, maybe go out narrowly, appreciate this could be a prize in itself for us. This season, just being in Europe, add it to the League Cup, and finishing top of our group, that's a major achievement for any Scottish team. In the Europa League, finishing top of your group is absolutely amazing, and we did that in spectacular fashion with our first ever win against Spanish competition and Spanish soil in the last game we played in Europe this season. So Benfica, for me, how do I put it, what they mean to me, to perhaps younger viewers out there? And I don't remember Benfica at their peak. I don't remember Benfica winning European trophies. It happened before even an old git like me was born. But what we got tonight, or earlier, a few hours before I've recorded this, Manchester City went through against Copenhagen, routine stuff. They've beaten them home and away. Man City have beaten Copenhagen in the last 16 of the Champions League, but they are the holders. Man City, they're the 23rd and current champions of Europe. I don't really get that excited about it. If we were to draw Manchester City, obviously it would be a different competition, but if we met Manchester City in Europe this season, people would be going absolutely crazy about that tie. But for me, Man City are kind of there's an old blues song, Death Letter Blues by Son House, Edward James House, S-O-N, Son, as in, it's not sun as in the shining sun, Son House, and there's not a lot shining about his songs. Blues, they certainly are. But Death Letter Blues, absolutely amazing. And I've only ever seen, I've heard the kind of Alan Lomax recordings from the 40s. Son House only came to prominence though to, my type of person in the 60s, in the kind of American folk revival. The hipsters basically brought the guy out of retirement. He was in his mid to late 60s when he started, suddenly he was getting pitched onto TV programmes. He'd packed it in for like 20, 30 years playing the blues because it wasn't making him any money. He had to go and get an actual a job. It was just during the Depression that he'd get into the blues. Yeah, he started performing the blues. An amazing character. But I saw him, it's still on YouTube. Look it up, Son House, Death Letter Blues, and you'll maybe get the wee, you can even call it a concert because it's just in a TV studio and you can see him just looking at the floor manager. Do I go now? Will I play it now? He's just a nervous, kind of frail old man. But the power behind what he does with an acoustic guitar, slide guitar, the old bottleneck guitar thing, very famous. And he's just tapping his feet. There's no amp or anything. There's an audience of a few dozen kind of hipsters, and it's just absolutely mesmerising. It's the Mississippi Delta Blues are right there. The White Stripes, they do it live. They perform it live. Again, you can find this on YouTube. White Stripes, Death Letter Blues. I don't know if I've ever recorded a cover of it, but it's Jack White. There's like thousands of folk in the audience, and they've got massive amps everywhere. He's got an acoustic style guitar, but he plugs the thing in and he is rattling it. It's just blowing everybody's eardrums out, and he goes at it for like 10 minutes, and of course. The lady comes in on the drums and they're battering it and then they're really shouting and screaming and absolutely going for it as much as they possibly can. And it's like, that's the way they kind of earn the right, not for you to say it's a terrible version, but it earns them the right to even attempt a cover of such a great song. And I think that's what's happened with Manchester City, where the money comes from is absolutely toxic. They've been a great club, Manchester City, in the past. They are a great English club. They've got this kind of steroids type thing with money from a kind of homophobic, murderous, disgusting regime. But they've got to the point where they've won 4 leagues in the trot, and all this money they've spent it in a way that assembles all these great players, and they can play beautiful football. And it gets to the point they are entertaining to watch. That's how sports washing watches. But you think, okay, in football terms with Guardiola and that, you've earned the right, to be seen as a European champion club, to get a bit of the lustre of that trophy. But there's a long, long way before you're anything like a Benfica. Benfica, the Mississippi Delta Blues, and Manchester City are, I don't know what you would call Manchester City kind of pop, Euro pop or something like that. The second club, Benfica are only the second club ever to be champions of Europe. They're the second club to retain the European Cup. There's only ever been 23 champions of Europe. There's only ever been 8 clubs that have retained it at any point, the Champions League / Europa / European Cup. They are one of only 6 clubs, I think, to reach 3 consecutive finals. Everybody knows about Real Madrid winning the first 5 European Cups from 56 to 1960 inclusive, but Benfica reached 5 European Cup finals in the 60s. They won the first 2 they were in. They played Barcelona in 1961 final. Barcelona had, obviously sat and watched Real Madrid winning the first 5 European Cups, and Real Madrid had put them out one of those European Cups, and then Barcelona put Real Madrid out when they were going for 6 in a row. They get to the final, they expected to win, but they lose to Benfica in Bern, and then Benfica the following season beat Real Madrid in the final. Puskas scores a hat-trick before half-time in the Olympic Stadium in Amsterdam for Real Madrid, but Benfica win 5-3 because they've got added Eusebio in that final. Eusebio, one of the greatest players of all time, a Ballon d'Or. And a legendary, really, really famous, their manager for those 2 European Cup wins, Bela Gutmann, from Austria-Hungary. He comes from Hungarian, but buried in Vienna. Unbelievable character, and I would recommend anybody this book that I'm currently holding up. The Greatest Comeback by David Bolchover was a book I had to get as soon as it survived the Holocaust and all that. Bela Gutmann. It's a fantastic, fantastic book. I would advise any football fan to get it. Fascinating character, Bela Gutmann. But he famously or infamously had no contract, nothing in his contract but bonuses. And the second year he's retained the European Cup. Benfica only the second club ever to be champions of Europe. And the Benfica board don't give him any kind of bonus or whatever, and he leaves in such a bad mood that he just curses them. He says, Benfica will not win another European final in 100 years. And there's 38 years of that curse still to go, and it's holding good. It's been true to its word so far. They reached the following season under a Chilean manager, new manager. They reached the following season's European Cup final, so they're going for 3 in a row. They're 1-0 up at Wembley against Milan. Eusebio has scored, and then Milan player Pivatelli takes out Mario Coluna, kind of basically snaps him, does something in his leg, and it's a days before substitutes, so they're basically playing with 10 men for the second half, and Jose Altafini, he scores 2 goals, and so that's it. Milan win that. Cesare Maldini, Paolo Maldini's dad, he's the captain. Next thing, then 65, they play Inter. Inter win the 64 European Cup, and Benfica are back in the final, and it's against Inter at the San Siro, the final schedule for the San Siro. And so they're playing Inter at home in front of 85,000 Inter fans. And again, somebody suffers an injury, and they're basically playing with 10 men for the whole game. He's a passenger. It's pouring rain, but they only lose 1-0, and their goalkeeper, the ball slips through his hand and crawls over the line because of the pouring rain. And it's the Inter team of Catenaccio, and they sit back on their 1-goal lead at home in front of 85,000. So they're really, it feels like they've been kind of cussed. And then in 68, they're back at Wembley for another European Cup final, but they're playing Man United from England. So they're playing an English team at Wembley, and they equalise. They're 1-0 down to Man United, but they equalise late on. It goes to extra time, but they eventually succumb to the skills of Bobby Charlton and George Best, and they lose that one. And they get to the European Cup final again in 1988. It's in Stuttgart, and they play PSV Eindhoven, and it's 0-0. Goes to penalties. I think it's 6-5 at that time. That was an epic penalty shootout before the Villarreal Man United Europa League final. That was like an epic shootout. 6-5 it went, and they lose that on penalties. 2 years later, they're back in the final again. Their 7th European Cup final. They've lost the previous 4 after winning the first 2, and Eusebio, long retired, he goes to the grave. It's in Vienna, this final, so he goes to Bela Gutmann's grave and asks him to lift the curse. They get beat 1-0. Frank Rijkaard for Milan. It's just, so the first team to beat them in European Cup final was the last team to beat them in European Cup / Champions League final. It's Milan again wearing their all white kit. In 1983, they reached the UEFA Cup final, the days when it was home and away. Benfica, they lose narrowly to Anderlecht over the two legs. And then in the Europa League days, they get to the final in 2013 against Chelsea in Amsterdam, again back in Amsterdam, this time at the Johan Cruyff Arena. They lose that 1-2-1, and the following season they're playing Seville in the same final. They're back in the Europa League final 2 years in the trot, and they're playing Sevilla in Turin in Juventus's stadium, and they lose that on penalties as well. So the curse, the Bela Gutmann curse, is well and truly still in force, but that won't matter to us, I suppose, if we don't get to the final. But we should just really enjoy where we are tomorrow night as well. The stadium that we're in, I know we were there a couple of seasons, 3.5 seasons ago. At that point, I was absolutely, I mean, amongst the things you should be upset about during COVID, not getting to see Benfica in the flesh is a very first world problem. It seems a bit churlish. But when you spent your whole life kind of obsessed with European football, European club competition, it was an absolute sickener. But I'd already long ago get sick, a decade previously, get sick of the fact that Rangers never drew Benfica. We never played them in European competition. Up to that point, Celtic, even before I was born, Celtic were playing the European Cup, and they seemed to keep getting them in the Champions League. I was like, I want to see Benfica, I want to get them off the list of European finalists that I've never seen. And I got so sick of it that I eventually just nipped down to Anfield. In the first Europa League match I ever went to see, Benfica featured in it. It was the quarter final of the first season of the Europa League 2009-2010, and Liverpool had a goal down for the first leg in Lisbon, but they beat them 4-1 at Anfield. Steven Gerrard imperious that night. Dirk Kuyt and Torres getting a couple of goals, El Nino. So it was a great night, and it was great to see Benfica. I just had to go down there and see them in the flesh. I had to see them live for myself. But even still, when we drew them that season, it was just gutting that I wasn't going to get to see them at my stadium, at my home ground. Really, really upset about that. But it turned into when we're beating them, in the Stadium of Light. We were 3-1 up. We hit the post to go 4-1 up against 10 men, I know, but oh my God, it was just absolutely devastating when we ended up drawing that game 3 each, even though we ended up finishing above them in the group and beating them in away goals. I feel like they were still in force in the head-to-head over the two games. Of course, we were 2-0 up on them at Ibrox, and they scored 2 goals late on in that as well. But compared to the first game, it was 2 weeks with 10 minutes to go. So that was that was a result compared to the first game. But yeah, that was absolutely devastating. I was just really more upset than anything else, but not getting to see them in the flesh. So I'm really looking forward to next Thursday night. And tomorrow night, I just hope we can stay in the tie to make next Thursday night the occasion it should be. But even the stadium itself, as I say, the Stadium of Light is a bit like Spurs Stadium, a bit like Wembley, Old Wembley, New Wembley, that thing where they moved to the original Estadio da Luz, or Stadium of Light, in the 50s, and then Euro 2004, they rebuilt it completely just right next door. It kind of overlapped the same site. They saw those pictures of White Hart Lane with the new Spurs Stadium getting built almost round about it, just waiting for White Hart Lane to be knocked down so they could fill in the stand, the last bit of the stands. Same thing there. So it's that kind of setup. It's pretty much the same site, just not the same pitch, so to speak. It's been turned round slightly. But the old Stadium of Light it ended up by the 80s. It was so much bigger than it had been in the 50s and 60s. It's kind of the reverse of Hampden, Ibrox, even that thing where in Britain capacities of stadiums, because terracing was getting turned into seating, it was less safe, and they kept reducing the capacities. Like Hampden, 1976 Scottish Cup final, which Rangers won against Hearts, was the first time Hampden couldn't hold 100,000 for a Scottish Cup final. The capacity had been reduced to a mere 83,000 or something, and Rangers filled it that day. But it was working the other way around in Portugal. It's a bit like the new camp. When Rangers won the Cup Winners' Cup, that goal Peter McCloy basically sets up. He has the assist basically for the third goal we scored that night early in the second half, and he knocks the ball. And I grew up just seeing footage of that every now and then. That massive kick out from Peter McCloy early in the second half. And it's like you can see daylight, and I used to think, how high had that gone when you can see above the stands at the new camp? But the new camp that I was when I was old enough to be watching European highlights of games that were happening there and then, there was an extra tier. There was a tier missing when Peter McCloy, still a gargantuan, massive, and maybe the most important kick out in the history of Rangers, but it still went a massive height. But the new camp was getting bigger as the 70s became the 80s, became the 90s. It was up to 120,000 the capacity. They're building extra tiers. They did the same thing with the old Stadium of Light. It get bigger and bigger to the point where in 1987, Benfica hosted Porto in a top flight Portuguese match. And I think the crowd was 130, maybe 134, I think 137,000. It's the record. It was over 130,000 anyway. It's the record for a European domestic league match. Hampden's got every other record, a European final, a European club match, a domestic cup final, an international. But the European record for a league game was at the old Stadium of Light. Ernie Walker of SFA fame. It didn't have many European finals, the Stadium of Light. It had Benfica when they were playing home and away in the 83 UEFA Cup final. It had the home leg of that, obviously. And it had one Cup Winners' Cup final. But they were applying for to host some European final in those days. And Ernie Walker of SFA fame on all these different UEFA committees. I think he was on the kind of stadium committee, stadium approvals or whatever. And the most Scottish thing ever, he goes over to Lisbon and the Stadium of Light, what to host this European final. So he's doing the inspection. He goes, no, your bulbs and your floodlights aren't strong enough. Stadium of Light, it's too dark actually. Is there a more Scottish thing to do to somebody than that? I'll bust your bubble. You think you're light? So it was too dark, so he knocked them back. But it did host the 1966, almost 58 years to the day. Rangers are playing there tonight. 58 years to the night since George Best was crowned the fifth Beatle. Quintos Beatle. I don't know the Portuguese. My Portuguese isn't very good. Not as good as Fabio Silva's. Did you hear him in that press conference? Absolutely brilliant. George Best goes out, Man United, I think just a goal up from the first leg at Old Trafford in the 1965-66 European Cup quarter-final, and they go out there and they score 3 goals in the first quarter of an hour at the Stadium of Light, and that's Best gets 2 of the goals, and that's the mop-top style. He's a young man in the 60s, and he's British, so the Beatles was the connection to be made by Portuguese people, and he got the nickname as the fifth Beatle when Man U won that game 5-1, but Real Madrid beat Partizan Belgrade in the final. Sorry, folks, it's a European. It might be our last European tie of the season. I've got to enjoy myself. And my favourite, I must admit, it's 2004. Obviously, they changed the stadium. A lot of the major stadiums in Portugal for Euro 2004. It was getting hosted by Portugal, and so the Stadium of Light, where we're playing tonight, it ends up. It's the new version. And it has the Euro 2004 final. It has the 2014 Champions League final, which is the first final between two teams from the same city. The first derby final, which is Real Madrid winning the European Cup for the 10th time. And they did that in the Stadium of Light. And they did it beating Atletico Madrid in the final after extra time. It's the only stadium to host, or it's one of the 2 stadiums from the only city to have hosted a European Cup / Champions League tournament. Because, of course, during the COVID, when COVID hit, it was towards the end of the 2019-20 season, and the stadium started getting shut down. So from the quarter-final stage onwards was played as one-legged ties. So half of them, just Lisbon was the city it focused on. Half of them played at the Jose Alvalade, the sporting stadium, and the other half were played, including the final, were played at Benfica's Stadium of Light. So at the quarterfinals, it hosted the game where Barcelona get tanked 8-2 by Bayern Munich, and it hosted the final where Bayern beat PSG by 1-0. Lisbon itself, really famous city when it comes to the football and comes to the European Cup, as you well know, because, of course, the green and white hoops at the Estadio Nacional in September 1955, Sporting Club de Portugal, they hosted the first ever match in the European Cup when they played Partizan Belgrade, the first leg of that European Cup tie. It was the first match ever played, and they moved the big games to even though all the 2 Lisbon clubs have got their own stadiums, they moved the more prestigious games to the Estadio Nacional, and they drew 3 each with Partizan Belgrade in that game. So that was a European Cup off to a flyer, the most exciting, glamorous possible start. And of course, the Estadio Nacional also hosted Rangers in 1948. Just be like, a few years prior to that, it's before the start of European competition, where friendlies were a massive thing kind of continental friendlies, and Rangers played Benfica in the Estadio Nacional. We beat them 3-0. Jimmy Duncanson getting 2 goals, Willie Thornton getting 1, and the local press, I saw this in the Bobby Brown, our goalkeeper at the time, Bobby Brown, his autobiography, he was talking about how the local press dubbed them the Tigers of Lisbon. Imagine being called after the capital city of Lisbon and a big cat. That's quite an honour, I would say. Bobby literally telling us that 2 can play at that game. So yeah, and also I think the following year, Benfica at the Estadio Nacional, Benfica played Torino in one of those glamour friendlies. It's getting to that state. It's becoming like Glastonbury last summer, where Rick Astley was playing with Blossoms in one tent, wasn't he? Doing the Smiths back catalogue, just doing all the Smiths songs, covering all the Smiths songs, while Johnny Marr was out on another stage doing the Pretenders. He's playing with the Pretenders. Because like, what's happening? And the one thing that was missing was, just by his absence, it became really obvious. The one person no one was talking about, but everyone was thinking about, and who nobody likes, was Morrissey. And of course, when you're talking about Lisbon and the Estadio Nacional, it's Celtic. Nobody likes, and everybody's thinking about when it comes to that kind of stuff. Got the first British team, all power to them, all fairness to them, to win the European Cup. They were the first non-Milanese or Iberian team to win the European Cup as well. They were the first ones to win it. Well, it's in the current shape, the actual trophy itself, the current shape. Benfica are the only side to have won only the old shape European Cup. I'm holding a picture up there, folks, of Bella Gutmann holding the first 2 European Cups that Benfica won. You can see it used to look more like the Henri Deloney trophy, which in itself has been kind of rejigged in recent years, got a lot bigger. But that's the European Cup. That became the big handled, big eared thing. Celtic were the first to win that because 66, Real Madrid won it for the 6th time, and they were given it to keep in that shape forever. So they invented a new one. But yeah, the Estadio Nacional, Celtic went a 1-0 down in that final in 67 to a goal by Sandro Mazzola. And his father, Valentino Mazzola, was a captain of the Il Grande Torino, the greatest Torino side of all time, one of the greatest Italian sides of all time, legendary side, who were on their way to their record equalling 5th straight Scudetto when they played in May 1949 at the Estadio Nacional in that friendly against Benfica. I don't know what the score was, because all everybody knows is that on the way back, their flight crashed into the Superga hill outside Turin, and everybody on board died, and Torino never really recovered. The only other decent Torino team was, or they could possibly match it, was their team of the 70s, who Rangers put out in the quarterfinals of the Cup Winners' Cup on our way to winning the Cup Winners' Cup in 71-72. It was 4 years later they became champions of Italy again, the only other time they won Serie A, but they didn't really recover from the Superga disaster of Torino the way Manchester United recovered from Munich. But their captain was Valentino Mazzola, and he's the father of Sandro Mazzola. So when Sandro Mazzola scored that penalty against Celtic in the 67 final and then lost the final, he's scoring on the ground where his dad played his last ever match, did his last ever professional thing before dying hours later. So that was quite a thing. But we're not going to be too hard on the Celtic, because Mazzola scored 2 goals when Inter won the European Cup in 64, beating Real Madrid in the final, and he got revenge on Celtic in the 72 semi-final. So we won't be too hard on Celtic for that one, for ruining Sandro Mazzola's return to his dad's old stomping ground. But it's a place of amazing history, Lisbon, amazing football history. And my favourite, I'll round off with this, because I really should talk about Rangers more specifically in this game. But my favourite factoid about the Stadium of Light is Otto Rehhagel, the legendary German manager, very idiosyncratic German manager, Otto Rehhagel. Late 90s, he got promotion. He won promotion for Kaiserslautern, and then won the Bundesliga with them at the first attempt the following season. It wasn't the first time Kaiserslautern won the Bundesliga, but you know what I mean. Straight up, and then won the Bundesliga, and he became Bayern manager, but didn't really work. He had this way of whistling at his players in the park. Didn't do the 2 fingers in the mouth thing that everybody else does, but he put the kind of like his knuckle in his mouth, and no one else has ever been able to. I've tried it. It just doesn't work at all. It's this amazing whistle he had, because he was an amazing manager, and he was at Werder Bremen. The Werder Bremen, a massive club who, they've got that derby with Hamburg, who'd won the European Cup and the Cup Winners' Cup. Werder Bremen had never even reached a European final until Otto Rehhagel, a man who could take you from the Zweite Bundesliga to Bundesliga champions within the space of a year. He takes on the Werder Bremen job, takes him to a European final, and they win the Cup Winners' Cup in the Stadium of Light against a certain Arsene Wenger's Monaco. And then he becomes manager of Greece, like a decade later, he's manager of Greece when they go and they beat Portugal in Porto in the opening game of the European Championships in 2004 and get all the way to the final, and they beat Portugal in the final in the new Estadio da Luz. So he's won the only major kind of trophy, if you like, a continental of both Werder Bremen and Greece, and he's won both finals in the old Stadio da Luz and the new Stadio da Luz. But the kicker for me, and that's not a pun on a famous German football magazine, is that the goal, Greece won 1-0 in that final Euro 2004, and their goal was scored by Angelos Haristeas, who at that point in time was a registered player with Werder Bremen. Unbelievable, what a coincidence. So yeah, I'm looking forward to this game tomorrow night. That's all I'm going to say about that. What's going to happen tomorrow night? Tonight. I'm talking early hours in the morning. It's kind of just past midnight for me, but it's tonight by the time you're listening to this. If you haven't switched off already, the manager in his pre-match presser talking about the fact that he doesn't have any wingers, or he's got 5 wingers missing. Of course, Ross McCausland. It is becoming. I'm talking about Saxon, and they were one of the bands on which the Spinal Tap were based in the famous movie. And it's becoming like the drummer for Spinal Tap. It used to be that it was whoever was sitting beside John Lundstrom in the sitting two in midfield was constantly getting injured. Now it's becoming the left-hand side. Sima is going out. We've got Cortez went out. We've lost Matondo. And then we had to get Ross McCausland across on the left-hand side the other night from his usual right-wing berth the other day against Motherwell. And he gets halved. He gets basically booted off the park before half-time. And he's struggling, but I think the manager was just trying to kind of play a bit of mind games with Roger Schmidt, the Benfica's German manager, when he was humming and hawing, earlier this evening about whether Ross McCausland will be fit for this one or not. I think he is going to be fit. I think he's going to be playing, but we've got concerns. We lost to Motherwell. I think we're kind of hoping that it was because the players had one eye on Lisbon. I think it was definitely the injuries that were affecting them. I think they were also drained by 2 epic wins, and wins can be as draining as defeats sometimes. A home to Hearts, that 5-0 thrashing of Hearts, and then especially I think going to Rugby Park and being a goal down and revisiting all those old traumas at Rugby Park and turning it around in the second half, and then having to hang on a bit because Cortez, as soon as we went 2-1 up, he gets injured and we lose all attack and impetus. So I think it just got to them on Saturday. It all been too much, and also we lost to Motherwell, I think, because not just because we made 4 changes from the starting 11 at Rugby Park, and one of them was Ridvan Yilmaz coming on in the place of Barisic, which nobody would have a problem with because Barisic did a nightmare at Rugby Park. But the knock on, there was also changes to positions throughout the team. Diamonde's been starting and doing quite well in the sitting 2 with John Lundstrom, so he gets pushed up to 10 on Saturday there because we've got no Cantwell, and Tom Lawrence is struggling to start 2 games in a trot. Raskin comes in beside Lundstrom, doesn't do a good job. We're losing because we've lost Cortez on the Wednesday night at Rugby Park. We then have to move Ross McCausland, who's getting his critics and all that, but I think he's been doing a steady job, a very steady job, the young man, in the wide right position. He gets moved over to wide left, and it's not really working for him. What else would another positional change in that game? Well, you've got to put Dujon Sterling will do your job, but playing him on the right hand side, obviously not as used to it, no way he's going to do as well as Ross McCausland over there. So we're losing kind of basic competence and sharpness throughout the team in all different departments, and that had a knock-on effect on the defence, I think. I think you just need to see Neil McCann's assessment of our goal, the first goal that we conceded against Motherwell on Saturday. I mentioned in my post-match reaction pod, I don't like that. I know that during the game I'm really nervous and you're hypercritical. You don't know the result. So it's hard to analyse clearly, especially when Rangers lose goals. You just see them all as disasters. But I did know that John Suter had made a big mistake. But I think you saw Neil McCann's analysis on Saturday night on Sports, seeing how the Ross McCausland being an unusual position for himself, he's not really sharp at marking up in the left-hand side, which leads Yilmaz to try and cover for him, which means John Souttar's going to come across to our left-hand side to try and get a hold of the guy that Yilmaz should be marking, and he goes in there too quick for a big guy, and it just all falls to pieces. So I think we don't want to be changing too much tomorrow night. Whatever we can hold on to, we should, in terms of consistency of selection. I would get Diamonde back into a sitting two. If we're going to go with the same 4-2-3-1, and that's up for debate. The manager touched on that in his pre-match presser in Lisbon. He said he's had to have a good think about whether he should play the same position or not, the same formation. He's probably, again, trying to a bit of mind games with the Benfica manager. But if he's going to go with the 4-2-3-1, just have the same defence. I think the defence was struggling because of what was in front of it the other day against Motherwell. A big part of our defence is from the front. We defend from the front, and everybody was really uncomfortable at the back. But I would go with Butland, Tav, Yilmaz, have Souttar and Goldson at the back, even though Goldson did score with exactly 1 minute on the clock for Benfica last time he was here. And Tav scored in the home leg. He scored at Ibrox for Benfica. So we've got guys that was really experienced in these games. I would then have Diamonde back in that sitting two with John Lundstrom. Surely we've got to get Tom Lawrence playing. Tom Lawrence has got to be starting at 10. And I would hope, I'm just kind of hoping and praying that McCausland will be all right to be in the right-hand side. And I would have started Silva on Saturday on the left-hand side. And you're looking at have Dessers up front on his own, but I don't know if that's a formation we'll play. I can't see right. If only it was Raheem Sterling. Well, that's disrespectful to do John Sterling because he's doing a grand job for us. No better than when in the last European game we played that historic victory in Seville. So I find it hard to see him missing out. Maybe he's going to end up playing in the sitting two. Maybe it's going to end up being a sitting three. A kind of defensive three across midfield. I would imagine him getting slotted in somewhere. If Ross McCausland isn't fit, are we looking at Scott Wright coming in? He did score against Lyon, bit of deflection in Europe a couple of seasons ago, but we'll be struggling, I think, if Scott Wright's going to have to get selected. But that would be my first choice, is just to get Silva on the left and hope Ross McCausland's going to be on the right-hand side with Dessers up front. But, we've got Tav, we've got Dessers, you've got, from 2 seasons ago, the top scorer in the Conference League, the top scorer in the Europa League. So these are European campaigners. Benfica were serious European campaigners last season. They romped their group in the Champions League. They romped their way into the Champions League group stages, and then they absolutely romped their group, finished top of a group. I think it was Juventus and PSG were in that group, and they end up going out to, I think it was in the last 16, to Inter, and they lost at home. They drew 3 each in the San Siro. This season, not been the same at all. They're straight into the Champions League group stages, but they lost their first 4 games. They were absolutely abject. They lost at home to Red Bull Salzburg, 2-0. They've never lost at home in the Europa League. We took them probably closer than anybody else, but the Champions League this season didn't win a single game. They lost, where did they lose next? They lost away 1-0 to Inter in the San Siro. I repeated their 1965 final. They lost 1-0 at home to Real Sociedad. I've only seen the highlights, but they didn't seem to get a single shot on goal. Benfica was all Real Sociedad in that game. And in the return in San Sebastian, Real Sociedad were 3-0 up, going on 10-0 at half-time. They missed a penalty. They had another goal disallowed for one of the strikers touching the ball, but La Real were about 3 goals up in the first half hour. They were absolutely blown them away. Benfica pulled a goal back in the second half, but that was it. Then they were at home to their 5th game, they were at home to Inter, and they're 3-0 up. João Mario, who used to play for Inter, he plays kind of on the left-hand side of midfield, but it's really tight. They don't go particularly wide, so he ends up being like a secondary striker. He scores a hat-trick in the first 35 minutes, and they're 3-0 up. Inter score 3 goals in about the first quarter of an hour, the second half, and it ends 3 each. And a chap, Silva, is it Antonio Silva? He gets sent off for the second time. He's been sent off a couple of times. I think he plays centre half next to our old friend Nicolas Otamendi. So, they've got a red card in them, and they ended up drawing that game 3 each, which meant they had to go to Salzburg and play Red Bull. They had to beat Red Bull by 2 clear goals because of the goal difference, because of the head-to-head to go through into the Europa League, just to clinch the third place in the group. And they were 2-0 up. They got a second goal right in the injury time. The chap Rafa Silva, who scored against us in that 3-each draw the last time we played them in this stadium, he's still there. He's their main man now. He's a playmaker. He's a number 10, kind of sits in the hole. He's the creator, really wriggly character. Got to watch him, cracking wee player. So, I think it was 23, 27 he plays. You'll know him anyway. He's the Todd Cantwell position, if you like. So, he scores to make it 2-0 over in Salzburg, and then Salzburg score in the second half. It's 2-1, and I think it's the 92nd or 93rd minute. It's deep into injury time that the big substitute striker, I can't remember what he's called, but he scored with a back heel to put them through. They really just crawled through, just nicked through into third spot. They go into the round of 32, the playoff round for the Europa League, which we got to sit out by dint of finishing top of our group. We got to sit that one out, and they played Toulouse, who had finished second place in Liverpool's Europa League group. Kind of mid-table in Ligue 1, decent level. It's one each. Angel Di Maria, Angel Di Maria playing for them, ex of Real Madrid, ex of PSG, ex of Manchester United, a guy who scored the first goal of the last World Cup final, an amazing player for Argentina and all his various clubs, Angel Di Maria. So he scores a penalty, and it ends up Toulouse equalise with quarter of an hour to go. And it's like 7.5 minutes into injury time that Di Maria scores a second penalty just to win that game. They get played off the park in Toulouse, but Toulouse could not score. They couldn't get that goal. It finishes 0-0. So they've kind of limped and crawled their way to this stage. Benfica, a shadow of the team they were in Europe last season. They get horsed 5-0, as we all know now, by Porto. The other one of Os Tres Grandes, the big three teams in Portugal. So that's a derby. They get stuffed 5-0 up in Porto on Sunday in the league. In the previous midweek, they lost 2-1 to the other big rival, the city rival, Sporting. The Green and White Hoops of Sport Club de Portugal, better known over here as Sporting Lisbon. They beat them 2-1 in the first leg of the two-legged semi-finals of the Portuguese Cup. So they've got the second leg of that to come. The beginning of next month, actually, they play their Green and White Hooped derby rivals when we're playing them. We're playing ours at the beginning of next month. But they're in a bad way, so you can't imagine Benfica losing 3 games in a trot. They can 3 different competitions, just the same way you couldn't imagine that for Rangers. So as the manager, as Clement was saying tonight, we've got to be ready for the reaction. They're going to come at us tonight. They're going to see us as a perfect opposition to take it out on, to get their way back into the favours of their fans. But hopefully we can do something. Hopefully we can do something, because it's a massive game. It's a really historic occasion. Rangers 12 times. This is the 12th time we've played Portuguese opposition. We've only been bested by them over the 2 legs, be that a knockout tie or in the group stages with the head-to-head record. Only once, and that was Porto in the 83-84 Cup Winners' Cup, and they put us out in away goals. We beat them 2-1 at Ibrox, and they beat us 1-0 in De Santis, and they went on to the final. They beat Aberdeen, who were the holders in the semi-final, and they lost the final to Juventus in Bâle, I think, certainly in Switzerland anyway. But it's Porto. It's a thing for Benfica. Porto have won 2. They've won the Europa League and the UEFA Cup. It's the same competition, if you like. The kind of UEFA Cup. Of course, they beat Celtic in the final in Seville in 2003 under Mourinho, and they've won 2 European Cups, or 1 European Cup, 1 Champions League. So they've won twice the amount of European trophies, if you like, as Benfica. But they've only been in 1 more finals. Benfica have been like, what's that? 2, 5, they've been 7, 10 finals. I think they've been twice as many finals, but they've only won 2 trophies. And they've got that tradition behind them, Benfica. They've won more kind of domestic trophies than anybody else. But Porto have kind of caught them and overtaken them in the trophy haul in Europe. So it's they really do want to do something in Europe. They want to test out that curse, the Bella Gutmann curse again. And the thing is, Otamendi, as well as being a World Cup winner, he won the World. I mean, he gets sent off against us that night we played him, and he was struggling for pace then. I thought he's now like about 54 years old, but it must be some sort of record. It would be some sort of record. He would win If they win the Europa League this season, the final's in Dublin, where he's already won it at the Aviva Stadium, Dublin, with Porto in the 2011 Europa League final, where they beat Braga. He won it with Porto, they beat Braga in the final, and Sporting are still in the Europa League, aren't they? Braga get put out by Karabag, but so he could end up winning it in two different Portuguese derbies with two different teams in the same stadium. So that's quite. Are Sporting still in the Europa League? Are they in the Conference League? I think they're still in the. So it's something else. It's quite amazing what's up for grabs for Benfica. But for us, I think everybody thinks we need to go. We almost need to go to this. To have any chance of winning the league. I don't think it works like that at all. I don't think that there's every chance Celtic will just fall away completely. They might totally implode, and we don't have to worry about it going neck and neck in the league. I'm just worried about the level of injuries. I'm worrying how much of a toll this is going to take on us. And if I had a choice, and you never do get a choice in these things, I would rather go to the Scottish Cup at Easter Road than that. I would love us to go on quarterfinals. I know in Europe, the Germans and all that, they talk about stuff like the 164th final or the 132 final, the 116 final. But for us, it's the 1-8. You start putting in the word final when it gets to the last date. And I like the idea of Rangers getting to a quarter final. When we lost that game, when we drew that game, we threw away that 2-goal lead against Benfica in the Stadium of Light the last time we played here. The following season we got to the final. The following season we got to a European final. The season after that we got absolutely destroyed in Europe in the Champions League. I like the idea that the last 16 quarter final would balance us out again. I think that just gets us back to that Steven Gerrard level, that kind of equilibrium. So I would like us to do it for that reason. But my God, that's 51 minutes. I think I've spoken enough. It might, as you say, this might be a last ever European preview pod, a last European preview pod for an away game this season. We might be going out in this round, so you can forgive me for enjoying myself and trying to sell you the glamour of Rangers playing against Benfica in the Stadium of Light. We could get absolutely destroyed, folks. It could be another massively memorable night, but for me the main thing is just that we don't make a fool of ourselves, that we're competing, and I'm really interested to see what our new manager is going to do. Philippe Clement I don't think he's ever get past the playoff round of 32. I think he's twice with Bruges, once with Genk and once with Monaco. He's gone out in the previous round to this, so I certainly don't think he's getting any further than the last 16. And he's got there all the various ways through the playoff rounds and through the Europa League group stages and through dropping out from the Champions League and group stage in third place and dropping into this round or the previous round. So he's in a bit of nosebleed territory for him. It's not nosebleed territory for Rangers in Europe in recent years. But I just want us to go out there and do ourselves proud, because we have a fantastic record against Portuguese sides. And we are we've lost that one game in Lisbon. The one time we did lose in Lisbon, we went on to win the trophy. So even then, there's a bit of consolation. Right, folks, that's more than enough from me. Thanks very much for your patience. I'll do a much, much shorter post-match reaction pod tonight, unless Rangers do something spectacular. Enjoy the game, folks.